taxes right now are the lowest they've been in over 50 years at the highest level. There's really nowhere to go but up. However, they play games, and some of the games are inflation. Inflation, as you know, erodes the buying power of the dollar bill.
Welcome to another session of Rock Your Money, Rock Your Life, and you are going to get rocked today by none other than my good friend, Robert Gill. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Rock? How are you? Thanks for the invite.
Well, I'm doing epic. How are you doing?
I'm epically doing epic as well, brother.
So listen, let's give some people some color here because you are a powerhouse as a person. I got to do an event when you were in the room, and you could just tell when some people have the it factor. They're just, their energy, the way people refer to them, the way you move around the room. And one of the things I noticed about you is you always start conversations in the form of how can I help you, what can I do, how can I serve? So I'd like to know where that comes from, but before, why don't you take us a little bit back, just a brief visit with your childhood, where you grew up and how you became who you are.
Yeah, thank you for that access, Rock. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, 75,000 people, at least when I grew up, in a 3-mile peninsula, 12 miles outside of Manhattan. And I was the youngest of 4. And in my neighborhood, everybody knew whose parents were alcoholics, whose siblings were drug addicts. The schoolyard was a living room. There was no doubt survival of the fittest. And, you know, based on where you were at in the pecking order, you had to figure out where your place was. It wasn't Queens or Brooklyn, but it wasn't too far off from Queens or Brooklyn. It was within that same range, whether it was chestnut fights in the schoolyard, people coming in to play Atari, but robbing your baseball cards. It didn't really matter. There was always head on a swivel, and always had to stay on your toes. So that was what was going on in the early childhood. In my house, my dad was a police officer, and he was that for 27 years. There was a lot of alcoholism, and I had an older sister who at a very young age was a heroin addict by the time she was 16 and I was 8. So that's like an early glimpse of what the world looked like in my house. My parents never divorced. They stayed married for 49 years before my dad passed away. May he rest in peace. But early on, it was, you know, listen, I would save my money in a piggy bank from having a paper route. And my older brother would take it to go buy a suit because he just got a job on Wall Street. I never had a say. So it was almost like a community situation early on. I think it's what drives me today.
It's amazing how so many entrepreneurs have had A, difficult childhoods, and B, started a freaking paper route. You know, if it's not that, it's cutting lawns or shoveling walkways for little old ladies. But there's got to be something in that where the problem-solving person was developed at a young age. What do you think about that?
That's a great question. I think back, you know, we would deliver the papers Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday, it was called collection, and you would have to go to each and every person to get the money that they owed you. And when you think back on it, I always remember there was folks that just didn't pay it for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. You know what I mean? So overcoming the expectation of what you were going to make that day versus what you made, the time you put into it, how to get more creative, when to knock on the door. You know, if you're delivering the paper after school from 3:30 to 4:30, people aren't home until 7 o'clock at night. So you got to go back, and then you got to go back. It's almost like fortune and follow-up. You got to go back the next day to be able to get your money. So yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you for that, and I never even thought of it.
So take us to where you're at today. You're a successful businessman, and you really like to help people in an area that some people leave for a later conversation. Sadly, we're not educated in the arena. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, you know, when I think back to a time in my life where money in my house was always scarce, there was always fights about money. There was always disagreements about money. My dad worked 3 jobs, and when there was no money left at the end of the week, he would blame my mom. There was whose name was on the milk in the refrigerator. And I always remember thinking, you know what? When I get older, I'm going to have a say in my money and not repeat, what I was brought up in. So it took me down the path of where I originally started working on Wall Street. I was opening new accounts over the phone. From 1998 to 2004, I opened up 3,000 accounts just by doing 300 dials a day. And as time went on, I began to really learn, the planning side of it. And what I noticed is people, for many reasons, but most specifically, they're not educated on money because, number one, it's not taught anywhere. And then number two, they're constantly changing the rules and creating these new products. So at the end of the day, if somebody's working a 9 to 5, they really don't have time to think about their financial planning. And it becomes an avoidance thing, Rock, which means that it just kind of stacks and builds on itself. They never pay attention to it. And they just do what everybody else does and put it into a 401k. Not to say that that's right or wrong, but there's really no education and science behind their thinking.
Yeah, well, but let's talk about that because, this is rock your money, rock your life. And I don't believe in single digit returns. I believe in double digit returns in your investments if you want to get ahead of the game. And yet we are taught as a culture, be careful, put your money in a 401k, an IRA, get 6-7%, to keep it safe, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this hypnosis about this. What do you do that helps people get ahead of the money game and change that pattern?
Once again, thank you so much. When you think about money, it has a charge, and people don't want money because there's a bunch of presidents on a piece of paper. People want money because of the feeling that it gives them, right? Whether it's a feeling of control, whether it's a feeling of safety, whether it's a feeling of, they got things under, everything they want in place. So people are after that feeling. Now, when it comes to the education, to your point, if somebody's going to say, look, I have $18,000 a year, I'm going to put into a 401k for the next 20 or 30 years. And I know when I retire, it's going to get taxed at ordinary income, and I take on all the responsibility for that, then God bless them. If they understand that it's going to be taxed at a high bracket when they retire. The challenge is folks think they're going to get money tax free when they retire because they were told by some advisor that they would be in the lowest tax bracket. And Rock, we don't know what taxes are going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now because they constantly change them, and they've changed them 40 times since the 60s, right? Yeah. So if we know that inflation is upon us, they're printing money left and right. We also know that taxes right now are the lowest they've been in over 50 years at the highest level. There's really nowhere to go but up. However, they play games, and some of the games are inflation. Inflation, as you know, erodes the buying power of the dollar bill. So what we do at Epic, we want to make sure that there's, number one, what is each and every person's economic philosophy first and foremost. We sit down, we ask questions, we have a team here. We want to know what their goals and objectives are. We want to know where they want to be. First of all, we want to show them where they are on the map. And then, where they want to be, we want to show them how to get there based on what they want to do and have a real, honest conversation that could take them down that path. And that conversation may mean, listen, you got to go out to eat twice less a month. You might want to cut this out. You might want to cut that out if you want to save this amount to get to where you want to go. Now, to your point, single digit rates of return. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard life to live. Do you own your own business? Is there infinite rates of return? Do you collaborate with other folks? Do you finance your own debt? Does your money make money in other investments while you're parking it somewhere else? These are real life healthy conversations with folks, providing they're willing to do the action steps.
So how would you, it sounds like a little bit of tax advice, a little bit of financial advice. How would you characterize the role you play in somebody's life?
So Epic Financial Strategies is our brand. We have two divisions, which is Epic Insurance Services. We also have a fiduciary side, which is Epic Wealth Management. I'm under the belief if you have a one-stop shop, financial planning, economic and wellness center, where the right hand is talking to the left hand. In other words, Rock, is your accountant speaking to your insurance agent? Is your insurance agent speaking to your fiduciary? Is your fiduciary speaking to your estate attorney? We provide that opportunity, and being able to provide that opportunity, we want to be able to kind of create a map and a program where people have access and they can see their world real time at the click of a button. So at the end of the day, They can look and see where all their accounts are, but they could also add all their planners to that website, which is a personal financial website that we help build. And in that space, it creates clarity and it allows folks to make decisions based on logic, math, and science, not emotional timidity.
That's awesome. So you have a network of people that are part of the team that you can refer people to. Does that include any legal advice or any legal references for people that are incorporating companies and things like that?
Absolutely, 100%.
That's fantastic. That's great. And so tell us a little bit now, let's take a little peek under the hood. What have you done to build your business as an entrepreneur? Because a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, they don't necessarily only need your services. They may be interested, how does somebody like that build this business of a business?
Yep. So for me, I was always a very good individual producer, right? Being in the business, and I struggled on the business. And then I read Tony's book, Tony Robbins, Money Masters of the Game. And with that book, what I took from that book, not only was the education phenomenal for all the folks out there that just need to get educated, but what I noticed, Rock, and this will make sense, is that from his stage, he was talking about creative planning, and people were going to creative planning because of what he was saying about them on stage and in the book. So I thought it was a marketing genius. So I said, I want to build something like that. And 2 years later, I go to Tony's event, egotistically thinking that there's 20,000 people there, and I was going to have a chance to meet Tony. That's where I was at, right? It took me all but 10 minutes to realize that there was no shot at that happening. But for the 4 days at UPW, I really learned a lot of cool things that led me to go down to become a platinum partner. And along the way, though, about a month and a half after that, I met Sean Callaghan. And that's an important piece of the story because Sean, to me, Rob Gill in 2017 was an example of what Tony was talking about on stage. So about 6 months after I met Sean, I invited him into my office, and you know, he's the creator and founder of Unblinded, which is a integrity-based sales organization teaching professionals how to go from hello to yes with integrity, with predictability. But at the time that didn't exist, but I knew he was a guy that could create something like that. So I said, hey, Sean, why don't you be Tony Robbins and Epic can be creative planning? And that was in March of 18. Fast forward a year later, me, him, and Chris formed, you know, Epic in a partnership at Epic. Epic already existed, but they became partners at Epic. And what I had envisioned in 2015, 4 years later, came true. So now for all the listeners, Rob Gill turned into a business owner while still being a operator, right? And what we've done in the last 12 months through COVID, we've increased our sales team from 6 to 15 folks, brought on an additional 3 administrators, and every single one of my persons in 2020 had their best year ever. I say that because from a entrepreneur standpoint, merging ecosystems, creating partnerships that are transparent, where everybody's winning, and having a game plan of congruency, it allowed us to really maximize in that space. And by the way, that's how I met you when I met you, you know, through those same type of ecosystem merger strategies. And I think for anybody out there, no matter what business you're in, everything I said is transferable. It's that you don't have, as a matter of fact, financial planners don't even do what I do. They don't know how to do it because they're taught such an antiquated way on how to present their products that 95% of them fail anyway. Not because they're bad, but just because they don't know how to create and cultivate their own relationships and then bring on team members. And that's the biggest thing that I learned through Tony, into Sean, and into Chris Crone, was the ability to create on the business accelerated strategies. And I can't say that enough.
Beautiful. Now, you have a part of your personality that for me, my experience is you just really seem to want to help people.
Yeah.
And you're very cordial. Is that something you got from your mother or your father, that kind of personality?
You know, growing up, the way and where I grew up, it was all about respect, sometimes dysfunctional respect, right? But always coming across people that struggled and having empathy for folks. And I think that really all came into play for me. You know, Rob Gill hasn't had a drink of alcohol since July 1996. And in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which, by the way, I'm not here to tell anyone to do that. I'm just telling my story. In those 12 steps is a pathway to a greater connection of whoever and whatever your higher power is. And it's really about giving kindness to others. That's why Tony resonates so well with me. The art of living is giving. And I really seek to hear who people are and what they want. And if I can help them, I want to be able to help them with boundaries, and being able to be valuable. I feel like I have a mission. I'm on a mission to be an example to God, be an example of God's grace and somebody that lived two lives, one of self-imprisonment of drugs and alcohol, and then one of freedom.